There's something about rain that makes us feel safe, like it's washing the world clean, keeping us inside where it's warm and dry. But not everything stays outside. Tonight, we're stepping into the kind of night where the rain doesn't bring peace. It brings something else. These are true stories of what can happen when the downpour starts and the shadows get closer. Stories that prove sometimes it's not thunder that wakes you up in the middle of the night. It's something much worse. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. The kind of place where people still leave their front doors unlocked. Well, some do. I'm not one of them. It's not because the neighborhood is dangerous, but more because of a night that changed the way I think about safety forever. This happened 2 years ago during late October. I remember because it was just before Halloween. It had been raining all day, and by nightfall, it turned into one of those heavy downpours, constant, steady, with wind that pushed the rain sideways. I was home alone that night. My wife was away visiting her sister, and I had just settled in for a quiet evening. I was reading in the living room, the lights low, with some jazz playing in the background. The atmosphere was actually kind of cozy until I heard the first knock. It was soft, just 3 light taps. I froze for a second, not even sure I heard it right. The rain was loud against the windows, and I thought maybe it was just something falling outside. But then it came again, this time louder, slower, more deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I stood up and walked to the door. We have a glass panel to the side of the door, so you can see who's out there. But the porch light wasn't on, and it was too dark to make anything out. I reached for the switch and flipped it on. There was a man standing there. He wasn't moving, wasn't knocking anymore, just standing. His head was slightly bowed, and he wore an old raincoat with the hood pulled halfway up. I could barely make out his face, but what stood out the most was that he wasn't wet. His coat had some drops on it, sure, but he wasn't soaked like you'd expect in weather like that. I didn't open the door. I just called out, "Can I help you?" He looked up, just a little, enough that I could see the edges of his face. He had a blank expression, no emotion at all. He didn't answer. "Do you need help?" I asked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He just tilted his head slightly to the side. That's when I noticed he wasn't standing on the doormat. He was standing just to the left of it, as if he intentionally avoided stepping directly in front of the door. I grabbed my phone from the counter. When I looked back, he was gone. I opened the door, heart pounding, and looked around. Nothing. Just the sound of the rain. No footsteps on the walkway. No car idling nearby. I shut the door, locked it, and checked every window in the house. I stayed up the rest of the night, barely blinking. The next morning, I looked at the porch camera footage. It recorded the man walking up, standing there for 10 minutes without moving, and then just gone. He didn't walk away. He didn't leave through the front. He just vanished from frame. I still live in that house, but I installed floodlights, motion sensors, and I never leave the porch light off especially on rainy nights. When I was 17, I worked part-time at a pizza place a few towns over. We didn't have a car, so I had to rely on the late bus to get home most nights. One shift, I stayed late to help clean after a rush, and I ended up missing the usual 10-15 bus. The next one wasn't until 11:30. It was pouring outside, cold, early spring rain, the kind that seeps through your shoes and jacket and makes every minute outside miserable. The bus stop was about 2 blocks away, and it was completely deserted when I got there. I remember sitting on the bench under the tiny shelter, just trying to stay dry. My hoodie was soaked. I was scrolling through my phone, headphones in, trying to distract myself, when I noticed something weird. The light above the bench was flickering. Not a big deal, it's an old stop, but it kept flickering in a rhythm, almost like Morse code. I took out one earbud and listened. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. I looked up and saw a man approaching slowly from across the street. He wasn't running, but he wasn't walking normal either. It was like every step was intentional, exaggerated. He wore a black coat, and his head was down. At first, I thought he might be homeless, but something about the way he moved made me freeze. He stopped at the edge of the sidewalk about 15 feet from the bus shelter and just stood there, in the pouring rain. I was under the shelter. He wasn't. He was getting drenched, but didn't seem to care. I tried not to look at him directly, hoping he'd just keep moving, but then he took a step closer, and another. He stopped again just a few feet away now. "Waiting for the bus?" he asked. His voice was low, raspy. I didn't respond at first. Then I managed to nod and say, "Yeah." He smiled, a wide, slow grin. "You know it's not coming," he said. That caught me off guard. "What?" He just repeated, "It's not coming." I started checking my phone for the bus schedule, but my hands were shaking. When I looked up again, he was closer, right outside the shelter now, looking in. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You already missed it. The next one's mine." I stood up, not sure what he meant. I was about to walk away when he suddenly reached into his coat. I bolted down the street, slipping on the wet pavement. I didn't look back. I ran into a gas station and asked the clerk to call the police. They sent a car to check the bus stop, but the guy was gone. The next morning, I got a call from the dispatcher. They said they checked the nearby traffic cam footage. There was no one on the street, no one waiting by the shelter. But I know what I saw. I never took the late bus again. I live in a 2-story house with my sister. It's a classic mother-daughter arrangement, meaning we each have our own separate kitchen. My sister, who's in her mid-20s, takes the downstairs apartment, and I have the upstairs. She's often not around, staying at her boyfriend's place about 20 miles away. I'm 30, and while I really shouldn't be the kind of person to get spooked when I'm home alone, I'll admit it happens. Sometimes, when the silence gets too thick, the house feels a lot bigger than it actually is. One of those nights was last fall. I was sitting alone in the living room, watching a scary movie typical for a quiet evening. The house is open and spacious, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen all blend into one large area. My couch sits right in the middle of it all. When I watch TV from there, my back is to most of the house, which, for anyone who's easily spooked, is probably not the best spot to be alone in the dark. The movie was one of those creepy psychological thrillers that gets under your skin. As I watched, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder every now and then, despite the fact that I knew I was alone. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the isolation playing tricks on me. After the movie ended, I turned off the TV, brushed my teeth, and made my way to bed. The house was quiet again. I turned off all the lights as usual. My bed is upstairs, so I tucked myself in, feeling that familiar sense of peace that comes from being home. I finally started drifting off to sleep, the weight of the day leaving my body. But that sense of peace didn't last long. 2 hours later, I woke up with a start. At first, I wasn't sure why, but then I heard it, a voice. At first, I thought it was just a fragment of a dream, but as I listened more carefully, it sounded unmistakably like my sister's voice, clear, echoing faintly through the house. She wasn't supposed to be home. She was with her boyfriend, 20 miles away. Still groggy and disoriented, I lay there for a few seconds, trying to shake off the sleep. The voice didn't stop. I heard her calling my name. It wasn't a casual, everyday call either. It was the kind of voice you use when you're trying to get someone's attention in a hurry, like when you're frustrated or trying to warn them. but that didn't make sense. She couldn't have been home. I couldn't figure it out. I thought maybe she had come back unexpectedly. Maybe there was some sort of argument with her boyfriend, and she had decided to come home early. As my mind raced, I pushed myself out of bed, walking into the dark hallway, trying to make sense of it all. The voice continued. I flipped on the hallway lights, and then I made my way down the stairs. The house was cold and silent, like it had been all night. I called out to her, my voice shaky with confusion. "What is it?" I shouted, half expecting her to answer right away. I moved through the living room, slowly, trying to get my bearings, but the house felt off. It was like the air itself was thicker than usual. I reached the foyer, and still, there was no sign of her. I looked around the dark hallway leading to her kitchen. The house felt like a labyrinth, even though it was just 2 floors. I finally reached the kitchen and flicked on the light. It slowly flickered to life, illuminating the space, but I saw no one. My sister wasn't standing there, and her boyfriend wasn't in sight either. I walked into her bedroom, expecting to find her there, but it was empty. I called her name again, louder this time. "Sarah, are you home?" I yelled into the dark, but only silence answered me back. That's when I heard it. A loud thud, like something heavy falling to the ground. It came from the bedroom, the one I had just checked. I rushed back in to see if I could find what had fallen, but there was nothing. The room was still perfectly in place. I started feeling dizzy, like I was losing touch with reality. I rushed back upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I locked myself in my room, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. I grabbed my phone and called my sister. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I sat there, staring at the phone screen, trying to convince myself I had imagined everything, that maybe the stress or the dark movie had messed with my head. But something kept gnawing at me, telling me it was real. That night, I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I woke up and checked my phone to see a text from Sarah. "Why did you call me at 1 a.m.? I asked her if she had come home, and she replied, "No, I'm still at Mike's house." That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I went downstairs to check her bedroom for any signs of what had fallen, but there was nothing at all. I tried to tell myself I was just overreacting. Maybe I had imagined it, but the vividness of her voice and the strange noise were too real to be dismissed so easily. I tried to ignore the feeling of unease that clung to me all day, but I couldn't shake it. It was as though something was watching me. Fast forward a few years, I was 14, left home alone again. This time, my mum was working overnight. My brother was away at college, and it was just me and my younger sister. It was a Friday night. My mum worked long shifts at the hospital, so nights like this were common. I was hanging out with a friend, Molly. We spent the night watching movies and chatting, and eventually she had to leave since her parents didn't like her staying out too late. After she left, I was left alone. I went back to my room to play a video game. It was an old Star Wars game I loved. My bedroom had a window that overlooked the backyard. I had just gotten comfortable when I heard a scraping sound. It was faint at first, but it grew louder. A chair being dragged across the deck. I froze. The sound came from outside, but it wasn't the wind, it was a distinct scraping. I got up and looked out the window. To my surprise, I saw someone sitting in one of the deck chairs in the backyard. I thought it might have been Molly coming back, but no, it wasn't her. It was a man, someone I didn't recognize. He sat in the chair, staring up at my window. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I immediately pulled away from the window, my heart racing. I texted a few friends asking if they were messing with me, but they all said no. Nobody knew anything about it. That's when the panic really set in. I dared to look out the window again. He was still there, staring directly up at me. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I quickly turned off the TV and huddled in the corner of my room, wrapping my arms around my knees. I sat there in silence, not wanting to move, not wanting to draw attention to myself. I waited for what felt like an eternity before I finally mustered up the courage to look out the window again. There he was, still sitting in that chair, not moving. I decided to confront him. "What do you want?" I called down, my voice shaky but loud. At first, there was no response. Then, I noticed his shoulders starting to shake. He wasn't responding verbally, but it was like he was laughing to himself, a silent, eerie laugh. The kind that made your skin crawl. I backed away from the window and hurried back to my bed, unsure what to do next. I didn't want to call the police yet, because I didn't know what was really happening. But then, I heard the back door. It was being pushed. He was trying to get inside. I panicked. I grabbed my phone, but I was too scared to make the call. I hid in my room, under the covers, listening to the sounds of the house. I heard the front door being tested next. It felt like he was checking every door. For a moment, I thought I was going to die in my own home. But after a few long minutes, the sound stopped. I never heard him again. I waited until the next morning, heart still pounding, wondering if the whole thing had been a nightmare. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been very, very wrong. These experiences, the ones that blur the line between reality and fear, have a way of staying with you. Whether it's hearing voices in the night or seeing a stranger in your own backyard, it changes you. It makes you question everything, your perception, your safety, and even your own mind. And the hardest part? You never really know when the next shadow will cross your path. Rain has a way of making the world feel smaller. It muffles sound, hides shadows, and pulls everything into a slow, eerie quiet. But sometimes, it doesn't just change the way the world feels, it changes the way it behaves. A stranger on your porch who doesn't belong there. A man at the bus stop who speaks in riddles and disappears like he was never real to begin with. These aren't just stories about bad luck or creepy coincidences. They're reminders that the unknown often hides in plain sight right outside your door, or standing just beyond the glow of a flickering street lamp. So if you ever find yourself alone on a rainy night, listening to the soft knock of water on glass or the steady drip outside your window, just make sure that's all you're hearing. Because sometimes, the rain doesn't just keep things out. It brings something in.